Good evening, I'm Leanne Pillay and welcome to Watchmen on the Wall. In tonight's show, Errol Naidoo speaks to John Jeffery, the Deputy Minister of Justice, about the delay in the implementation of the Anti-Trafficking Bill. Errol Naidoo also speaks to Katie Modrau of the A21 Campaign about their experiences on the ground. I speak to Jared Naidoo, a 22-year-old law student, about his challenge to men in the fight against human trafficking.
Mr. John Jeffery, the Deputy Minister of Justice in South Africa, thank you for talking to us and welcome to the show.
Thanks very much.
You did a lot of work on the Anti-Trafficking Bill, which is better known or more commonly known as the TIP Bill, but the full name of it is the Prevention and Combating of Trafficking in Persons Bill. Now, during the parliamentary process, you were in the Justice Portfolio Committee finalizing the bill. It took about 4 years to get through Parliament. President Jacob Zuma signed the bill into law at the end of last year, but there is growing concern that the delay in the implementation of the bill is undermining the fight against human trafficking amongst women and children. Can you explain to us why there is a delay in the implementation of that legislation?
Okay. Look, firstly, one of the reasons why the bill took such a long time, and I think it was less than 4 years. It got introduced just before the World Cup in 2010, and it got passed 2013. But what the bill does is criminalizes trafficking. A lot of trafficking is already criminal. So trafficking of people for sexual purposes, trafficking of children, those are already crimes.
And that's in the Sexual Offences Act.
Yeah, and the Children's Act as well. What the bill does is widen the net, so there's a liability on carriers of trafficked persons, and there's a crime associated with that. The people the landlord who rents out property can get caught in the net as well, which is quite important. So it's been widened quite a bit. The other aspect it covers is labor trafficking. The difficulty was that the bill also provides for support, or the Act rather provides for support for victims of trafficking. And the issue really was to ensure that genuine victims got support. And given that we have a country of immense poverty, a large number of immigrants, that people didn't misuse it and claim to be victims of trafficking to get that support. So it bills this might be getting a bit technical, but bills that deal with work that a number of departments are doing always take quite a bit longer. That's also been the problem with the implementation of the bill, because regulations have to be made by different sections, by social development in particular, on the method to be followed in assessing whether a person is a victim of trafficking, the police, Home Affairs, and so on. So the delay has been basically because getting those regulations finalized and promulgated. But I'm informed that that process is pretty close to being complete and that the bill will be implemented very soon. There was a belief that the sections relating, or the crime section, could be implemented almost immediately, but a number of the crimes refer to a victim of trafficking, and that is something that requires regulations to define whether a person is a victim of trafficking or not.
Now, I sat in a number of the deliberations when the Justice Portfolio Committee was finalizing the bill, and it became very clear this is a comprehensive piece of legislation, is going to effectively address the crime of human trafficking, and that there's so many different government departments involved in enforcing this bill, making it work effectively, and I can understand why the delay. But from the organizations I work with that help women who are trapped in the sex industry, help victims of trafficking, they are growing concern because the bill took such a long time through Parliament, and understandably so, because it is a comprehensive piece of legislation, that now the fight against human trafficking has been undermined because we don't have this legislation in place. I spoke to the lady leading the A21 campaign, and she said currently, people being called for trafficking situations are getting even suspended sentences when they should be getting at least 30 years in jail. Does that bother you or concern you?
Look, I think the facts of each case need to be looked at. When the Portfolio Committee was dealing with the bill, and that was when I was still a member of the Portfolio Committee, we asked for the statistics on convictions for trafficking, and were quite alarmed to find that most of them were suspended sentences, very heavy suspended sentences, but still the guilty person walked free. But on inquiry, we then found out what was happening was that the prosecutors were accepting plea bargains, that they weren't so sure about the strength of their case, and I suppose following the old adage of a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, they were agreeing to let the accused not spend time in custody, but in the return slapped them with quite a huge suspended sentence, obviously intending to prevent it from happening again. That has been changing, though. There was a case, I think it was year before last, where a person had the book thrown at him for human trafficking because the prosecutor went all the way to trial. And then there's that recent case, can't remember the name now, from here in the Western Cape, of a woman who got forced into marriage with an older man, and he has been found guilty. So that is changing, but I think the issue of the suspended sentences was linked to the way in which the trial was being conducted.
You said that it would be implemented soon. Is there a date perhaps that...
I would say it would be before the elections. I don't want to give a date and then find that there are complications and that date can't be met. But I do want to assure you and the viewers that I don't think people can get away with trafficking without this bill. The laws are already there. The bill just tightens things up. So these convictions that I've been speaking about have happened in terms of existing law, the Sexual Offences Act and the Children's Act. So although the bill provides specifically for a crime where people are forced into marriage without their consent, and that is deemed to be trafficking, our courts have found that's a crime already in this recent case I spoke about. So the gap is really with labour trafficking and with the sort of accessories, as it were, to trafficking, rather than the traffickers themselves.
An additional concern is obviously the gathering of intelligence. You mentioned that when you asked for intelligence on how many cases there have been, we don't really have good intelligence on that. And the organizations working to rescue women and children out of these traffic situations are saying, because the legislation hasn't been implemented, we don't have proper intelligence. So we don't actually know in South Africa how many actual trafficking cases there have been, because it's not seen as trafficking. They're prosecuting under the Sexual Offences Act, the Child Act, and all kinds of other acts, but it's not maybe recorded as trafficking. So if you ask somebody, how many trafficking cases have we had in South Africa, they will say very little.
Look, one of the issues when the bill was in the Portfolio Committee was what's the extent of the problem. As I mentioned earlier, the bill was introduced before the World Cup. There was quite a bit of pressure on us to pass the bill before the World Cup, because there were stories of large amounts of women and children who would be trafficked for sexual purposes for the World Cup. We felt we couldn't, but we got the law enforcement agencies in to tell us their plans, and they basically had quite a good plan, including a toll-free number that people could phone. After the World Cup, we got those agencies to come back, and in fact they had not. So it was police, it was customs, immigration, and so on. They hadn't detected any case directly linked to the World Cup. So, there is a problem of information around the statistics is important, but since the Sexual Offences Act and the Children's Act have been in effect, there is no reason. I would say all major trafficking cases then are recorded. I don't think the bill is going to make, or the Act is going to make much of a difference in that regard. So I think the issue of statistics is pre-sexual offences and pre-Children's Act.
Okay. The other question I wanted to ask you is the training. Have the South African Police Services and the National Prosecuting Authority been properly trained with regard to implementing this legislation?
Look, I can't talk for the police, unfortunately, but as far as I'm aware, that with the prosecuting authority, the training has been going on and would still need to be going on.
A concern that has been raised with the people I work with around the country is that prostitution, the sex industry, is a pull factor for trafficking. And the more these syndicates operate in South Africa, the more we're going to see trafficking happen. There's been reports in the media that the ANC government is looking at decriminalizing prostitution. Is this correct?
That is an issue, that's an issue, it's come to a large extent from the South African National AIDS Council. The issue is being looked at. At the moment, the matter is with the Law Reform Commission. So they were tasked to conduct research into the whole issue of adult prostitution and what should happen in that regard. So we are awaiting their report as government, and once we get the report, then there can be debate around what the approach is to the issue. So it's not a specific issue of there will be decriminalization. It's a matter of, it's something we need to look at. We need to be informed, and we will be informed by that South African Law Reform Commission report.
Yes, we participated as an organization, we participated in the Law Reform Commission's deliberations. One of the things we did find, and we conducted research and compiled research from all over the world, especially nations that have already gone ahead and decriminalized or legalized, is that when prostitution is legalized in a nation, trafficking cases spike. Child prostitution spike as well, because the monitoring of the sex industry by police and other law enforcement authorities is relaxed, and these syndicates then have almost a legal umbrella to operate under, and so trafficking cases have increased significantly in this nation, in that nation. These submissions were made to I think the Justice Portfolio Committee when they deliberated on the anti-trafficking bill. Are you aware of those submissions made on that issue?
Look, because the trafficking bill wasn't about prostitution, I don't think we spent much time on that issue because it wasn't part of the bill. And as I said, the prostitution debate will await the Law Reform Commission report.
But most of the trafficking in South Africa is sex trafficking. That's the majority of trafficking. There is some for work and servitude and all of that, but I think if you look at the reports in the media over the past 3 years, most of the trafficking in South Africa was sex trafficking. So don't you think that the anti-trafficking bill is going to deal primarily with sex trafficking in South Africa?
Yes, it will, but as I said, already in terms of the Sexual Offences Act, as an interim measure, trafficking for sexual purposes is illegal and subject to penalties.
Yeah, so the only shortage really, or is that the courts are not armed yet properly to be able to implement the stiffest penalties possible. Like, for example, when I look through the bill, people could go to jail for up to 100 years and be fined 10 million rand, and that's not happening yet, which obviously undermines the fight against trafficking.
But as I said, in cases that have gone all the way to trial, there have been stiff sentences given to the persons found guilty. The problem has been where the prosecution, for they've got a discretion as to what they do, have accepted a plea bargain, and that would be a guilty plea in return for keeping somebody out of jail. And that's why you have, I think they were agreeing to these fairly hefty suspended sentences. So if the person's caught again, then they go back to jail. Then they go to jail. But what I'm saying is that I don't think the Act will. Where things will change with the implementation of the Act is that there will be more categories of crime, but those are more what I would call accessories, people who were involved in some way or other in the trafficking, not the actual traffickers themselves. And then with labor trafficking, those will be the new crimes that are created. The others are already crimes.
Has the Justice Department got any plans to work with the organizations that are helping women out of trafficking situations, those trapped in prostitution against their will?
Look, on many matters or most matters, we look for a good working relationship with civil society, and I'm sure on a matter like trafficking, we would need to do the same. It's a big problem. You would need as much support as you can get, and you would need everybody working together to combat it.
Okay, so then my final question is, so from the Justice Department's view, do you view trafficking, human trafficking in South Africa as a serious and growing problem, or do you think it's not a biggest problem? Like, for example, in the Justice Portfolio Committee, Mr. Mario Ambrosini said that this shouldn't take so much time off government. It's not really a big problem. Do you agree with that, or do you think it's a serious problem?
Look, the difficulty is we kept asking for statistics when we were processing the bill. So that was when I was a member of the committee. And as you have said, the statistics are quite low. So it's difficult to quantify the problem without having statistical information. However, it is a very serious crime. A person who is forced to do something against their will is equivalent to slavery. And that is, I think, a horrendous crime to force somebody into slavery. So it is, we would see it as a very important crime. The extent of the problem we would need to monitor as we go along, but I don't think whether it's seen as a huge problem or not as seen as a huge problem is going to make much of a difference. The issue is, if it happens, it must be dealt with, the people must be prosecuted, the people must be punished, and with the Act being implemented, those people involved, a wider group of people involved in the commission of that crime, will also be prosecuted.
Mr. John Jeffery, thank you for speaking to us.
Sure, thanks.
I appreciate your comments and your time.
Sure, thanks a lot.
I'm talking to Katie Modrau of the A21 Campaign. Katie, welcome to the show, and thank you for talking to us.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Now, the A21 Campaign, people heard of it, but most people don't know what it is. Explain what the organization does and what A21 stands for.
Fantastic. So A21 stands for Abolishing Injustice in the 21st Century. That's always the first question everyone asks. What we do is we're a global organization that is committed to fighting modern-day slavery, or what we know as human trafficking today. We're a global organization, so we're based in 9 countries with 10 different offices. It is hard to keep up. We grow very quickly. And yeah, South Africa is the second last plant that we've had. Our latest office is planted in Thailand. So yeah, Cape Town is a year old now. In fact, in March, it's a year old.
And what has the response from Cape Townians been to the A21 campaign?
It's been fantastic. I think it was a real God thing, the timing that we came here in South Africa, because it was very close to the time that the bill was signed in South Africa.
You're talking about the Anti-Trafficking bill?
Yes, the TIP bill, yes, for sure. So I think it's a very God thing that we've been here, and the response has been fantastic, not just from Cape Townians, but the greater Western Cape and South Africa at large.
Can people get hold of A21 and join the campaign if they're concerned about trafficking issues? Very easily. We would love people to join. In fact, we're only as strong as many people who are on board with us and willing to get involved. We say that not one person can do everything, but if everyone does something, we really stand a chance of abolishing this injustice. Now, A21 was started by Christine Caine, right, who's very well known in South Africa because of the amazing work she's doing in Europe. Powerhouse. All across the world. Tell us a little bit about Christine Caine's work. So Christine's phenomenal. She's our visionary and our founder, if you want to call her that. Her husband, Nick, is our CEO, but Christine is a real powerhouse. She's a woman who stands up for what she believes in. She obviously comes from a background of severe abuse, so her heart is very much for people who are exploited and downtrodden. And yeah, in 2008, she just had a vision that human trafficking was an issue, and if she wasn't going to do something about it, who was? If the church is not rising up and doing something about it, then who is going to do something? Excellent. And from that, the A21 campaign was born out of the kitchen of our office in Australia. So are you here because human trafficking is a huge problem or a growing problem in South Africa?
Absolutely, yes. We were sent here, as I said, a year and a half ago because of the need in South Africa and the unique way in which trafficking presents itself here in South Africa.
Now, just to bring you up to date, we've been doing a lot of work as Family Policy Institute before the World Cup,
Yes.
Soccer World Cup in 2010. We did a lot of awareness about the dangers of the sex industry and its links to human trafficking. And we had international television channels coming down here, working with us, going to safe houses, talking to women that have been rescued out of the sex industry. That problem persists. So I want to ask you, now that you're working with the Hawks and with the police, going out on the streets, is it your opinion that sex trafficking in South Africa or human trafficking is a growing problem?
Yes, definitely. If we look globally, first of all, it's an organized crime. So when it's an organized crime, you know that there's a lot of money to be made from it. In fact, the reality is that it's the second largest or second fastest growing organized crime. It ranks in the top 3 with the illegal sale of arms, the illegal sale of drugs, and then the illegal sale of people. So if you look, you can sell a gun once, you can sell a drug once, and then it's of no use to anyone once it's been sold and used. But a person, you can sell over and over and over again.
Right. That's what makes it so lucrative.
Exactly, so profitable. So when you look at that, yes, it is a growing crime and it is a growing problem. But specifically in South Africa, yes, we are noticing that it is a growing crime. And not only that, but the people who are the traffickers, if you want to say it, the rings and the syndicates who are managing trafficking in South Africa are getting cleverer and smarter and making what they do look more legitimate and harder for us to prove that it's trafficking.
There are a couple of organizations in South Africa that makes the argument that if you legalize or decriminalize the sex industry, that is prostitution, that you would better deal with issues of trafficking. Do you believe this? And have you seen this kind of thing in other parts of the world?
Well, I suppose the first thing to do is look at other parts of the world where prostitution is legal, and we look at Amsterdam. That's one of those places where it is legal. Human trafficking is still an issue there. In fact, it's probably one of the most notorious places for women who are tricked to go thinking they're going to be dancers and land up working in the red light district. So there are pros and cons to both, definitely, as there always are to both sides of the argument, but it is definitely not a cure or a quick fix to preventing human trafficking. As I say, it's an organized crime. They're criminals. If you legalize prostitution, there'll be other ways to get around, to get around bringing women in illegally. And even if you have to have all the permits and everything, documents can be forged very easily. Right. So if you look at it as a quick fix, I definitely don't think so. No.
Would you agree with me if I said that the sex industry is the pull factor for trafficking, sex trafficking?
Definitely, yeah, definitely. Sex industry, sex tourism, the fact that we push so heavily being sexually active, and in the media when it's pushed, the more sexual partners you have, the more successful you are. All of that, of course, definitely.
Now, we've interviewed the Deputy Minister of Justice at our Parliament, Mr. John Jeffery, and we spoke to him about this delay in the implementation of the Preventing and Combating of Trafficking in Persons Bill. That's what the bill is called, its full name. That bill took about 4 years to go through our Parliament to be finalized. It then took a couple of months for the President to sign it into law, and he did that late last year. But now we're well into the new year, 2014, almost the 3rd month, and the implementation of this bill is nowhere to be seen. Yeah. People can't actually understand why it's taking so long for the bill to be implemented, especially as incidences of trafficking is in the media almost on a weekly basis. Yeah. So what would your appeal be to our government, to the Minister, Deputy Minister of Justice, as far as implementing the anti-trafficking bill is concerned? Let's implement it. That is my appeal. Let's implement it. What is the delay? I understand that there are many role players and many departments of government who are mandated to take care of different parts of the bill and different implementations of it. But we have had 4 years to prepare for it, longer to prepare for the implementation of this bill. We have had many workshops, many conferences about it. It's time now to implement the bill. What is your major concerns? Why do you need that bill as desperately as you do, having experienced what you experience on the streets?
Well, the one thing about, well, there's many things, there's many benefits to having the law actually implemented. The big thing is that it actually defines what human trafficking is completely. So if it's completely defined what human trafficking is, it means you're able to identify victims and adequately deal with victims who are identified. Secondly, the bill makes sure that victims are seen as victims and not criminals, so not illegal immigrants or law offenders themselves, but they are actually treated like victims and assisted rather than thrown in jail or deported. Thirdly, it gives power to our SAPs and to our law enforcement. Right now, one of the big issues is that if we do catch traffickers, if we do catch human trafficking, it's prosecuted and docketed not under human trafficking, but under other illegalities. And we're having to use other legislation to prosecute traffickers, which number one means that there are no stats recorded for human trafficking because we're recording them under Sexual Offences Act, or we're recording them under kidnapping of people, or labor. There's very many other areas that these statistics are subsumed into.
So we don't have proper intel.
Exactly. So we're not getting proper intel, which means it's hard for us to monitor what is happening actually on the ground. Is it growing? Is it not? Are we being effective? But secondly, thirdly, it actually assists law enforcement with making the arrests, but putting people away for the amount of time that they deserve. Seeing justice happen and justice served in these situations, and traffickers not getting off on 500 Rand bail as we've had many times in the past.
I know.
Traffickers off on 500 Rand bail and right back on the street earning triple that in 2 hours.
Yeah, that has been a major problem, and it's come up in the deliberations of the bill in the Justice Portfolio Committee. Yeah. That there were 2 Chinese women that brought 3 teenage girls from China under false pretenses, ran a brothel in Cape Town and prostituted these young girls. They got caught. I think they got a 2,000 Rand fine because there was no bill in place to deal with this. Exactly. And if you look at the provisions of the bill, if they were prosecuted under this bill, they probably would have gone to jail for 50 years.
Yes. Life or R1 million fine or both. That's the minimum sentence. Absolutely. With the bill. So obviously, we're really wanting this bill to come through and be implemented because it empowers our law enforcement, it empowers us on the ground who work with victims, but it empowers the victims themselves as well.
Now, people obviously watching the show, looking at you, this diminutive young lady, you going out with the walks, you're going out with police into real situations, and they probably asking the question, how do you do that? And why do you do that?
Why? I think that's very easy to answer. I've got 2 hands. I've got a brain that can think. I've got the Holy Spirit within me and God on my side. And if I've got 2 hands that work, why am I not using them? This is just the way that I am outworking my time here, if you want to call it that. We all have the areas of life that we are, best suited for, and we all have a responsibility to get involved somehow. And this is how I outwork it.
So you're not afraid?
No, I'm not. I think when you call to something, you're protected in it as well. Obviously, we take precautions. This is not me being all, Rambo here. I'm putting black face paint on and running in with guns. That's not how it is at all. We are very wise, and we never go in if we think it's going to be dangerous. And we just bring what we can to the table, which is assistance to victims. Yes. We're not doing anything special or anything out of the ordinary other than providing assistance to victims who are identified.
Have you helped a lot of victims?
We definitely have. When you say a lot, we've only been here a year, so the amount of victims we've been able to assist is probably not mind-blowing in terms of organizations who have been around for years and years. But yes, we have been privileged to help a number of victims since May last year, which has been incredible. It's always very humbling to see how we can assist victims, getting them home, joining them up with their family, whether it be overseas or in Johannesburg, setting them up with a new opportunity here in Cape Town. It's always a real privilege.
Katie, there's a lot of people out there that want to get involved in this kind of ministry. They want to help women at risk, vulnerable women and children in the sex industry that's been abused and exploited. Yeah. What would your message be to them?
Get involved. If you can, do it. Not everyone can be on the front lines. This is the honesty and the reality of it. Not everyone can be on the front lines. Not everyone can be going in and assisting victims in raids and assisting victims in shelters, because that's not what everyone is gifted in. Maybe you are an excellent network and an excellent fundraiser. Use your strengths and get involved that way. Us civil society organizations or NGOs on the ground can't do what we do without funding. Maybe you are an incredible advocate or you're good at advocacy. Get involved that way. Sign petitions. Get involved in the political climate around us. Maybe you are gifted or you have the ability to be a counsellor or get involved in safe houses, then do that. If you have the means in your hand to do it, why not?
So Katie, we want to thank you for the work you do, for your courage, and for your tenacity, and for answering the call of God in this important ministry. God bless you.
Thank you, sir.
And your family, and may you go from strength to strength.
Thank you, I so appreciate it.
Tonight I will be speaking to Jared Naidoo, a fifth-year law student, about a petition he recently posed in the fight against human trafficking. Jared, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Before we delve into the detail of the petition, perhaps you can give our viewers an overview of this call to action and your motivation behind it.
Yeah, so basically, from when I was young, I only figured this out now. I've always had this like desire in me to protect people. So since I was a kid, my dream was always to be an FBI agent. Every boy's dream. But coming through real life, you know, you got to get a degree, you got to do X, Y, and Z. I kind of suppressed this emotion within me to act out. And it was up until recently that God really did a number on me. I was driving in my car on my way to work, and I was thinking about this issue, and I just felt like I needed to voice my opinion out, especially towards men. For me, the fight against human trafficking, I don't see it as a fight for women. I see it as a fight for men. Now, if I had a girlfriend, she come up to me and said, some guy was harassing her, I wouldn't tell her, go fight your own battles, you know what I mean? I honestly believe that we as men were made physically bigger, stronger than women, not so that we could exploit that, but so we could protect them. So I wrote this letter when I got to work, of course, in my lunch break, just to kind of inspire men, to fill them with conviction and to try and get a response where they would act out against this injustice. It's pretty rife in South Africa. And at the end of the day, it continues to grow and become more of a problem because good men stand by and do nothing.
Yeah. So essentially, this is a call to men to rise up and take action. Okay, can you give us a typical scenario of what is currently happening in South Africa in terms of human trafficking?
So what typically happens in South Africa, and I heard this from a documentary from a guy who was part of a gang in Joburg who was operating in human trafficking. They said what they do is they have a spotter in like Thailand. And what he would do is recruit girls, young girls, show them images of hotels and tell them this is where you'll be working if you come to South Africa. Ignorant and in need for money, they say, okay, fine, this sounds great. They get to South Africa. Somebody picks them up at the airport, transports them to a house where they have their passports taken away from them for whatever purpose they need. What further happens is they then get tied to a toilet. And from there they get force-fed drugs. And what this is basically there to do is numb the resistance, the soul, and ultimately the body. And basically it's an attempt to get them to do what they want, what the traffickers want. And if they don't listen, what also happens is that they would get a team of guys in to gang rape them. And this kind of breaks the woman down to a point where they're just so submissive. Their soul is just destroyed, mentally, emotionally, they're broken. Their self-worth has been diminished to its lowest point. And yeah, at the end of the day, they just, you know, they think of themselves as filth. They don't feel any worth. And they're just like, you know what, I'll do it, fine, just leave me alone type of thing.
And the sad thing about this is it's happening in our own backyard, our own country. It's for us as South Africans to become more aware of what's going on in this industry in particular.
Yeah, it's quite rife in Cape Town specifically. And I mean, if people would just open their eyes and see what's happening, you'd be shocked to know that it's possibly happening in your area.
Okay, then back to your letter. You talk about how we as Christians, when saved, we jump into the lifeboat called the church and sail away from Christless existence that we once had, often forgetting those that are still left on the sinking ship. Could you elaborate a little on it?
It's an analogy that I kind of stole from a guy named Rob Morris. He's the founder of an organization, anti-trafficking organization called Love 146. And he says basically our lives represent a sinking ship, BC, you know, before we've met Christ. And we're living in the sinful world and we're confused and we're lost and we come to this place called church. And in there we find all these friendly people, this great environment where we can be ourselves, where we can change, where we can better our own lives. And it's like your life was a sinking ship and now you jump on this lifeboat called church, often pushing women and children out the way to get on there and you start sailing away. You need to get away from that life. But the question is, where are you sailing to? Because God is still on that boat. You know, he's the captain of that boat, and he sees everything that's happening. It's like God has called us to be salt and light, but often we get stuck in church. And what use is a light if it's around, I mean, a very well-lit building called church, where the rest of the country is falling into darkness, and all the people in the church are just sitting together, having Sunday services, which is obviously important. Everybody needs their time with God. But then they start meeting on a Tuesday evening, then there's something on the Wednesday, then there's something on the Friday, Saturday mornings. And you find that a lot of Christian people are all sticking with one another. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's not what we were called to do as Christians. We're supposed to get filled up on our Sunday into God's Word and then venture out. Exactly. Reach the lost. And the only way to do that is to go out there. We shouldn't sit in church and invite them in and see who comes. Otherwise, we'll never change anything like that.
Yeah, you refer to that as the safe zones versus the dangerous zones.
Exactly.
Great. All right. Do you think that perhaps men are looking at this from the wrong lens, a lens of saying, what can just one man do to combat such a tall task? What would you say to men that are thinking this?
I think it's important to focus on the one, as they say. A lot of advocates of this have said, focus on the one. Don't look at the statistics and say there's 27 million people. What can somebody like me do? Everybody can do something. We're not asking everybody to be Liam Neeson here and bash down doors and travel across the world to save people. You can be a baker, you can be a carpenter, you can be special forces, you could be an advocate. Everybody can do something. And I think that's the idea that people have. They either think that they're too little, they can't do anything, or they feel that the numbers are just too outstanding that one person can't make much of a difference. But, to be honest, I'm nobody special. As you said, my name's Jared Naidoo, I'm age 22, and that's about as far as my fame stops. That's all I am, but here I am trying to make a difference. And I mean, one of the things we're trying to get going is to do like fundraising activities, for example. Okay. And we're trying to keep it, we don't want to keep it strictly men, but it would be good if it's a group of men doing it, so you can actually show that men are fighting the battles they're supposed to.
Yeah, that's good. You also mention the aspect of making people aware. So in communities, mothers and daughters and children that are susceptible to this industry, to make them aware of what's going on so that they too can, put their foot down or not allow themselves to get caught up in these kind of industries. Because traffickers will use whatever means they can to draw women and children, make it enticing, and if we make them aware of it, it's hopefully breaking that.
Look, education is very important on this topic. A lot of the victims get tricked, and it's people like us who are more educated on the topic would think to ourselves, but why would you do that? But for them, they're very naive. A lot of them are very desperate for money or a way out of a specific lifestyle. And for somebody who gets offered a job for 28 grand a month to go work in a massage parlor, you've got to think to yourself, come on, seriously? And then these perks are you'll get the free car, you'll get this, you'll get that. And then also on top of it, they say, don't tell anybody, don't tell your friends, we're trying to keep it, hush hush. And we'll need your passports. Things like that should sound an alarm for the average person, but if you're not really educated on the topic, you think, okay, it's kind of normal, because you're hopeful. You're hoping that this is going to be the greatest thing that ever happened to you. And this is how they're preying on people every day. So education is extremely important. Personally, at first I was like, I hate spreading awareness. I hate it. I'd rather go out there and shoot a couple of these guys. But unfortunately, God told me, listen, calm down. You need to speak. The more people you get involved, the more people you educate, the more people can come and join this movement. So
it's good. It's great. All right. So in closing, we have an audience of men that are sitting here and watching. What would your plea be to them in this regard?
My plea would be to get involved. There are many ways to get involved. And don't see this as a fight for women. As you can see from the previous interview with Katie, it's now a woman at the forefront of this fight in South Africa. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it should be men. This isn't a fight for women, it's a fight for men to fight other men and stop what they're doing. There's various ways you can get involved. You can email me, you can email Katie. find out how you can get involved and just take some time up, because, you know, being in the legal sphere where I work, I understand the difference between different types of consent. So you get your normal consent, which is, yes, you can do that, or no, you can't. But then you also get tacit consent, where by your silence, you are tacitly approving of something. So you've got to ask yourself, are you tacitly approving of systematic rape of women and children? And the answer is yes. Yeah. So you need to stand up. Think about it. You've got a wife, a child, a niece, a sister. They are all potential victims of this crime. And most people think, you know, it's not my problem. It's not happening to me. It's not happening to my family. It's not my problem. But we need to understand that as this world grows more perverse through things like pornography and stuff like that, the demand for paid sex, violent sex, grows. And as this demand grows, there isn't more women coming out and growing up and being like, I can't wait to be raped every single day. It doesn't happen. No. So as the demand increases, they need the supplies to increase as well. And what do? Because they're criminals, they forcefully take that supply. So as the demand increases, if we don't do anything to stop it, the supply is going to need to increase, which means the probability of a female that you love being trafficked increases every single day. So we have to join forces, we have to stop it.
That's good. Jared, I want to say thank you so much for joining us on the show and taking the time out for this. To our viewers, men in particular, our hope is that you would heed the call to action.
Welcome back to the program. I'm delighted to announce a fantastic music event that is going to take place in Cape Town, in Paarl, as a matter of fact, on Sunday the 30th of March, called the Summer Jazz Series. Kirk Whalum, international gospel artist, is coming to our shores to do Gospel According to Jazz Africa. Now, he's done 3 before this, the Gospel According to Jazz Chapter 1, Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. He's now decided to come and do an African flavor to the Gospel According to Jazz. Opening the show for him is none other than Jonathan Rubin, one of South Africa's top jazz artists and also a worshipper of God. Jonathan, tell me what it feels like to be opening for Kirk Whalum.
Well, it's a great honor, and I'm so humbled by the opportunity to open the show, because Gospel According to Jazz has opened a lot of doors, you know. The church are very now receptive of instrumental music, you know. And when people always used to ask me, what genre is this? What is this? Is this jazz? What is this? You know, and because of Gospel According to Jazz, we can now say that it is gospel jazz. Yeah. You know, so
he made it so popular.
He made it so popular, and Jonathan Butler also helped a lot with that. You know, and so opening this show, it's really a great opportunity, and also for the organizers to ask me to do this, because it tells me that what I've been doing is not unrecognized, it's being recognized, and they know that I'm a gospel jazz artist.
I think they realize that you're going to be a perfect complement to Kirk Whalum. He worships God through his music, and so do you. And I think it's going to be a wonderful opportunity for Christians, especially in South Africa, to experience this, to see Kirk Whalum doing what he does so well, and to see our own homegrown Jonathan Rubin worshiping God through the genre of jazz music. It's going to be a fantastic show. So next up, we're going to speak to Kirk Whalum telephonically from London. Kirk, welcome, and thank you for talking to us.
Oh, I'm very honored to speak with you, and even more excited to be able to come and play in your neighborhood.
Yeah, I think all South Africans are excited to have you on our shows once again. Now, South Africans are very familiar with the Gospel According to Jazz 1, 2, and 3, especially Chapter 2, where our homeboy Jonathan Butler participated in that recording. But we're very excited to hear about the Gospel According to Jazz Africa. Tell us what inspired you to do this.
Well, you know, many things. I will say that around the time that I was writing for this recording project, Madiba was beginning to, I guess, transition. And I have a great love for him and respect, as do, most human beings. But I had, read a great deal about him and had the pleasure of meeting him. And so I wanted to, and at the same time, George Duke passed on as well, who was, as you know, a very big part of all three of those chapters.
That's right.
And much of my musical career as well. But when, sort of thematically, I really did really kind of theme this recording to South Africa and to Madiba and to all of the influence that shows, hopefully shows in much of my music and much of my writing. Since the day that I met Jonathan Butler years and years ago, and even before I met him, actually, I was just a big fan. And then meeting him, and when I was living in Europe, he was living in England, and we got a chance to get together, and then subsequently recorded things together. And then, as you say, eventually he was so kind to participate in my Gospel According to Jazz, Chapter 2. So this new recording and our South African tour this time really is kind of themed towards your beautiful country and your people.
Yeah, and we thank you for that. Now, there's the two things we love, both Jonathan Rubain and I. We love Jesus and we love jazz. And you bringing the two together, and so for many Christians, there's such great excitement to hear Kirk Whalum do the Gospel According to Jazz Africa, and we obviously believe that there's going to be an African flavor to this recording. Tell me, is any South African and African artists going to be performing with you?
No, not at this point, and that has more to do with really me having the opportunity to come to South Africa and spend enough time to make some relationships, to actually meet and interact with more South African musicians, because the trips that I've made there, none of them really have lent themselves towards me having that kind of time. We sort of have to keep moving and keep the bills paid as well. So we sort of on to the next date, wherever that may be. So not this time, but it certainly is not because I wouldn't like to. I think it's just more a matter of me having that God opens the door for me to spend more time there and make some more friends and be introduced to more South African musicians and not just South Africans. There's a lot of great artists who reside in South Africa who are from everywhere. Like I have a friend Kunle Ayo from Nigeria who I believe still lives in South Africa, but he is one of many great artists who are along with the great South African artists who I would love to interact with.
Yeah, you're going to love Jonathan Rubain. I don't know if you've heard him, but he's one of South Africa's rising Christian stars, an incredibly gifted and talented bassist. He's going to be opening for you, and maybe you guys can jam or do something together. People are looking forward to the Summer Jazz series that's going to take place in Paarl on the 30th of March, right after the Cape Town International Jazz Festival. Now, maybe Jonathan wants to say something.
I just want to say that the Gospel According to Jazz really opened a lot of doors for guys like myself. You opened up a new genre for music and for years to come. And it's a legacy that you have now, and I believe that God gave this vision to you and this project, and I'm so glad that you opened it up and for the whole world to see, and because of that, I now play at conferences. I was last year with Bishop Michael Pitts in Ohio. I play at churches all over South Africa, so I want to say thank you, and I want to say thank you for listening to the voice of God and responding on that, because like I said, now we can play in churches and we can take jazz to the people and instrumental music, and so I want to say thank you, and I'm excited to meet you on the 30th.
Oh man, Jonathan, I really appreciate those words, and that's very encouraging. You'd be surprised, just how much that means, from a musician like yourself. But you know, I want to mention to you too, Jonathan, that you know what you, the kind words that you mentioned about, you know, my being an inspiration via the gospel according to jazz. You know, you rewind about 25 years, and or maybe a little bit more. I was inspired by a group called Koinonia.
Yes.
Yeah, you're familiar with them.
Alex Acuna and Abe Laboriel and Usto Mario.
Justo Mario, that's right, and several other just great musicians, and that really reminds me that, you know, how this works, you know, that God allows us in a given dispensation or a given epoch to, you know, to latch on to something. You know, it's not something that I invented by any means. You know, it's definitely something that I saw and was inspired. I was like, wow, you know, that's what I want to do. I want to strive for excellence in my craft, but in such a way that gives God glory, like volitionally, you know, proactively, you know, and that's something that, you know, if many people see in different ways, you know, not everyone sees that on the sort of artistic level that maybe you and I do, because that involves, as you well know, a great deal of sacrifice to our craft, you know, to as I say, worship God in the practice room, you know.
Yeah. Kirk, we want to thank you for the beautiful music you make. We thank you for loving Jesus and demonstrating that through your music. And I think you and Jonathan are going to really blow South Africans away, Cape Townians away, on Sunday the 30th of March at the Jazz Series concert. Because both of you, when you play your music, you sense that you love God, that you're worshiping God. The anointing of God is present. Even when watching your DVDs, you can feel the presence of God. So we want to thank you for that. Thank you for the inspiration you are, and we look forward to seeing you on the last weekend of the month of March. And may God bless you and bring you safely to our shores to come and lift up the name of Jesus through your wonderful craft.
Thank you so much. God bless you both. I look forward to meeting you.
Thank you. God bless. And don't forget to get your tickets for the Summer's Jazz Series on Sunday, the 30th of March in Paarl in the Western Cape. Tickets are going fast, about 100, 165. You can get them and copy your ticket. Watchmen on the Wall will be there. Jonathan Rubain will be there. Kirk Whalum will be there. We'll see you there.
That's our show for tonight, and thank you for joining us. Remember to vote your values on Election Day, and please visit our website, Family Policy Institute, and register for Errol's weekly newsletter. The latest issue of Joy magazine is in retail outlets across the country, so please get your copy. Remember to SMS STAND to 48833 in support of the Family Policy Institute with a donation of 10 Rand. Thank you for joining us tonight. Good night, God bless, and remember to keep standing.